Imagine you are falsely accused of murder, and your case becomes so hopeless that you decide to plead guilty. But that's not the worst of it. Your case is so bad that you decide to plead guilty without being offered a deal. And that plea turns into the death penalty. What started out as a compromise to get a life sentence in prison just turned into your execution. You might be asking yourself, why would any innocent person take a plea deal that risks their life? How bad does your case have to be? We're about to find out. I'm Michael Semanchik, Executive Director for the Innocence Center, and this is Marilyn's story. Marilyn Mulero served 27 and a half years in prison for the homicide of 2 Chicago gang members, a crime she did not commit. Young, naive, and receiving extremely poor legal representation, Marilyn was encouraged to sign a risky blind plea of guilty. Because blind pleas don't come with supporting agreement from the prosecution, they can't be withdrawn if things go badly at the sentencing phase. Marilyn unwittingly threw herself at the mercy of the court. Unfortunately, there would be no mercy. Marilyn was sentenced to death. She was locked up in 1992 at the age of 20, and she would remain in prison until April of 2020. Her story is as scary as it is sad, but it would inspire a young lawyer by the name of Justin Brooks to take her case and in turn start the California Innocence Project. What you're about to hear is told by Marilyn Mulero herself, and she's going to tell us what on earth caused her to make such a risky plea deal.
My name is Marilyn Mulero. I am a mother of 2 sons, grandmother of 4. I am my mother's daughter, only daughter, of 6 boys, and I'm her pride and joy. I was working with American Mills, which was making envelopes. I worked in the stock area and the packaging area, and I was also attending Truman College at the time. The day I was arrested, we had just arrived from a funeral from a guy called Mudo, and I got arrested on Washington Cortez by 2 detectives, one named Ernest Halverson and the other one was Reynaldo Guevara. And they placed us in the car, in the vehicle. They drove off to California Division. They got off the car, made a couple phone calls. After they responded to the phone calls, they got back in the car. Then they drove us to Humboldt Park. At Humboldt Park, they took us to where the guys were deceased. We stood there. They kept questioning us for like a good 10, 15 minutes regarding, you girls did this and you girls gonna tell us why you did it. And, they were just asking us basic questions about, they wanted us to say we committed this murder. After none of us responded to them, they took us to Beach and Spalding and they displayed us before the Latin Kings and Queens.
The Latin Kings are a street gang that was founded in the Humboldt Park area of Chicago by Ramon Santos in 1954. Originally called the Imperials, this group was initially started to overcome racial discrimination. Over time, it descended into criminal enterprise and grew its ranks to include 160 chapters operating in 158 cities across 31 states. They actively engaged in drug trafficking, assault, burglary, identity theft, money laundering, and homicide. By displaying Marilyn in front of the Latin Kings like this, the detectives were putting her life in danger.
So there was a whole bunch of people out there, anything could have happened. They could have taken our lives right there. They placed our lives in danger at that moment. After they got out the car, and I don't know what happened between the detectives and what conversation they had with the guys out there. They got back in the car. Then they took us to the precinct.
Wow.
To Grand and Central.
What was going through your mind when they put the handcuffs on?
I don't know. At that moment, I felt like, what the hell? What did I do? It's like, why are they coming to get me?
Yeah. Did you think at that point that you would get convicted of this, or were you thinking that it would all get cleared up at some point?
No, I kind of thought it would be cleared up, but it didn't turn out that way.
From the very beginning, Marilyn was in dire circumstance. Investigators denied her access to an attorney, and she was interrogated for more than 9 hours. Without sleep and still without counsel, she was pressured under the threat of receiving the death penalty into signing a prepared statement. That statement would implicate her for both murders. But because she wanted to be alive for her children, she reluctantly signed the statement, not really understanding the true consequences. When Marilyn finally secured a lawyer, he did not provide proper representation. No witnesses or officers were questioned. There was evidence pointing in a different direction, but he never followed up. In short, he never investigated the case.
I ended up getting an attorney, and the attorney did me so wrong. He was so corrupted that he made me do things that I didn't know I was even doing. I didn't have the knowledge, the legal knowledge. I didn't know what really was going on, what it entailed. I was just going along with whatever he was saying. I was like, okay.
So that brings you to the point where he tells you to plead guilty early without any sort of deal.
Well, his response was like, well, you made a statement, you put your own foot up your ass, and we have witnesses stating that they saw you commit a crime, blah, blah, blah. That was his thing. And I was like, no, who, I had no idea who these so-called key witnesses were because I've never seen anything of anybody stating that they were key witnesses placing me in the crime scene or anything like that. But the confession was a confession that was falsely given by Elverson and Guevara coming in there threatening me with the death penalty.
It should be noted that detectives Halverson and Guevara have a troubled law enforcement record. Together, their investigations have led to more than 20 exonerations. It is still unknown how many innocent people they may have sent to prison.
I'm facing that possibility of them telling me you will never see your kids again if you don't take the blame for one of the murders. And any mother that loves their children would do whatever for their children. So I signed a false confession admitting to a crime I did not commit to avoid the death penalty, but still in all, it wasn't avoided. I was still given the death penalty.
Just to clarify, we mentioned this blind plea earlier. When Marilyn's attorney recommended that she make a blind plea deal, he did not negotiate with the prosecutor to remove the death penalty. This effectively left Marilyn at the mercy of the court. Once she made that plea, there was no walking it back. And as you're about to hear, she was abandoned by her attorney to be sentenced alone.
And he was not in the courtroom. He left me in the courtroom of the day of sentencing. He left the courtroom, left me there by myself. So I had no idea what was going on. And the bailiffs, there was 2 bailiffs there. One of them was Angie, and the other one I used to call Mama Burns, because every time I went to court, they were always there for me. They always fed me. They always made sure I was okay. So I remember those ladies, and they came up to me and they're like, do you know what just happened here? And I'm like, no. She's like, you just got sentenced to death. And I'm like, I'm still not comprehending or understanding what's really going on. And I'm like, okay, So she walks me and she's like, do you need me to call somebody to come get you and take you back to your housing unit? And I told her to call Sergeant Smith or Lieutenant Arnold to come get me. And she did that. She called the lieutenants to come get me. And she explained to the lieutenants, hey, this is what happened. She just got sentenced to death. I don't think she knows what's going on. I think I was in shock, because I'm still not knowing. My attorney's gone from the courtroom. He left me there by myself. So I'm like in limbo, not understanding what's going on. These, ladies are telling me I was sentenced to death. I'm like, okay. It was like nothing, I'm like, all right, what does that really, really mean, But it took me to go back to the housing unit where everybody already, by that time, already saw it on the news that I was sentenced to death. So when I get to the unit, all these girls are crying. They're hysterical. Oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like looking at them like, what the hell's going on, And then by seeing their reaction and they're telling me, they were like cursing at me like, what the fuck, muñeca? They sentenced you to death by lethal injection. That means the state's gonna fucking kill you. I was like, that's when it hit me. That's when reality kind of like slapped me in the face, And then I just told the officer, just let me go in my room. I didn't want to be around nobody.
It's impossible for most of us to imagine what it's like for an innocent person to be convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Being forced to leave everything you love behind to live out the rest of your days in prison. And yet, even in the darkest of hours, in the worst of places, Somehow, kindness finds its way in. A spark of divinity, giving hope at just the right time.
I believe it was December 23rd. And then I was taken to Dwight Correctional Center. And the wardens, the chaplain, majors, and lieutenants came and got me. And they escort me to the location, which is death row. They call it death row, where I would be residing there as an inmate. And I don't know, it's like they welcome me with open arms, and they pray for me in what we call the day room. We stood there, they prayed for me. They gave me like 3 boxes and 2 bags of, belongings and beddings and food and, hygiene products and stuff like that. And they put me in my cell and they said I would have to remain in this cell for 7 days, quarantine, make sure that, I didn't have any drugs in my system or I wasn't sick or anything before I was able to expose myself to other offenders there.
Do you have a cell to yourself, or do you share with somebody, or how does it work?
No, you have a cell to yourself when you're back there. And I just went in there and I sat on the stool. It was a table with a little stool. And you have the bed and you have a little toilet and sink connected. And it's pretty small. It's like a closet. It's like a pantry closet, real tiny. It's not like a bedroom closet, real nice and big, It's not that kind of stuff. It's like maybe like a 10 by 8 maybe. They're kind of small. And I went in there, I sat on the stool, and I don't know, after a couple hours of me sitting there, I just got on my knees and started praying. And once I started praying, I felt like this weight being released from me, like, don't worry about it. God's got you. That's all you got to think about is about God. God's got you. He's going to get you through this. And once I started realizing that, I got up and I started putting everything up. I started making the bed. And then the girls came to the door and they were like, hey, introducing themselves to me. And then I noticed that the hallway, because when I first got in, I didn't realize that it was like Christmas and the unit was decorated and they had a Christmas tree that was decorated until, the officer allowed me to have the slot open so I can communicate with the ladies there. And I saw the Christmas tree. Funny, I love Mary Jane candies. They had Mary Jane candies wrapped around the tree. So I told the ladies, oh my God, where you guys get Mary Jane candies? I ain't seen one since I've been locked up, right? They were like, well, if you could push that Christmas tree to your door and get Mary Janes, you could eat them all. And guess what? I pushed that tree to that door and I pulled the Mary Janes and ate them all.
Oh my.
So yeah,
Wow.
They made the best of me getting there when I first got there. They kept me busy.
In the day-to-day life, so you're in your cell at night, like, is there like a community area where everyone gets to mingle during the day, or how does it work?
Well, when you're back there on death row, there was a total of 8 rooms. And then there's a gate that separates segregation from you. So you get to see the movement from the ladies at segregation. Back there on the condemned unit, we have, like I said, 8 rooms. 1 room was turned into a kitchen where we had a freezer, refrigerator, microwave. We could buy stuff from the snack shop or commissary, frozen items, put them up, and we can cook there. We had another room that was called an exercise room where we had a bike and some mats, to exercise. And like I said, these are little rooms. They just remove all the metal, stuff out of there, the toilets, and just turn it into, those little areas. And we had a sitting area where we had 2 seats. You could only have 2 people out at a time. So whenever somebody else wanted to step out and go to the kitchen or exercise, somebody else would have to go into their rooms.
And how many total ladies were there?
When I first got there was only 3. I ended up being the baby, 23 years old, going to death row.
Eventually, Marilyn returned to court to fight her death sentence. On her second appeal, she won her life back. The court vacated the death penalty, but not the conviction, and so that meant she would spend the rest of her life in prison. But for now, she was safe, and that would give her a chance to fight for her freedom.
I went back to court in 94, I believe, to get my plea guilty. It was denied, so I went back to death row. And I ended up going again to court in 98. That's when the appellate court, I believe it was the appellate court, granted me my appeal. Then after that, I got sentenced to natural life.
How long total were you behind bars?
27 and a half.
Wow. With the help of 3 organizations, the California Innocence Project, the Exoneration Project, and the Illinois Innocence Project, Marilyn would win her freedom in April of 2020 through a clemency petition signed by Governor Pritzker. Marilyn's name would later be cleared in August of 2022 when her conviction was reversed and charges dismissed by Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox. Like so many exonerees, getting free and clearing her name was just the beginning of putting Marilyn's life back together. As you can imagine, after decades behind bars, it is nearly impossible to find gainful employment right away. Most exonerees don't have skills or resources to get started and find themselves depending on family or friends, if they are still alive. Our society will spend immense resources prosecuting and incarcerating the guilty, but when it comes to rebuilding an innocent person's life, relatively little is done. Even in states that offer compensation for wrongful convictions, exonerees have to fight for every dollar. As such, many innocent people struggle to get back on track, sometimes for the rest of their lives. All that said, Freedom Day is a blessing. For most, it's like a dream coming true.
The day of my release, we kind of kept that on the hush-hush. The wardens in the prison system and staff were a little concerned that it would have turned into a fiasco. So we decided to not let anybody know that I was being released. But I didn't even know I was being released. It's funny how it happened too, because my attorney didn't get a hold of me and told me I was being released.
So what happened?
Well, what happened was I was supposed to be released supposedly on the 7th, because that's when Justin was told that I was coming home. But due that I had to do paperwork and they have to wait for parole officers to do their stuff, it was postponed to the 8th. I had a officer who stayed with me at the hospital when I went for my surgery, and she became an internal affair officer. Mm. And she came to me and everybody's like, oh shit, IA is here. How your contraband? And then she's like, I'm here to see Marilyn. Where's Marilyn? And they're like, oh shit, what you doing now? I'm like, I don't know. So I'm like, I look and I see it's her. I'm like, oh, it's nothing. She's just probably coming to kick it with me, Mm-hmm. She comes to me and she looks at my face. She's like, do you know? And I'm looking at her like, no, what? She's like, do you know? I'm like, what? Woman, tell me something. What? She's like, oh, you don't know. I'm like, what are you talking about? So she whispers in my ear, you're going home. I'm like, stop playing with me. She's looking at me like, oh my God, I'm for real. Dorsey is doing your paperwork right now. She's closing your account and she's doing all your paperwork so that you can sign it so you can go home. And here I am still like in this belief, like, come on now, don't play with me. And she's like, I'm for real. So then I go to the living room because the officer's calling me. I go to the living room. The officer's like, fucking Aunt Mulero, you're fucking going home. And I'm like, gee, thanks, guy, but please don't broadcast it. I don't want people to know nothing. We were on lockdown, so I didn't want to get, want to get the girls on the unit wired up, and because we're not supposed to be hanging out in the hallways. Mm-hmm. I don't want them to get in trouble because I'm going home. So we kept it on the hush hush. And then a lot of the officers would come in to see me and people were like, what's going on? Something's going on. Something's going on with Muñeca. They were like putting their heads together and I'm like trying to avoid the whole drama that's going on around me. Mm-hmm. And, very quietly, I left a lot of stuff behind to some of the girls, and the next morning, the 2 officers, I believe it was going to be their off days, but they decided to come in just to see me leave.
Oh, wow.
And, they came in first thing in the morning. They were hitting that buzzer that wakes everybody up, that irritates people because it's loud. And they just kept tapping her like, hey, everybody, guess what? Mulero's fucking going home today.
Oh, wow.
Everybody started running towards the gate. I'm like, oh my God, what did you just start?
Yeah. No hiding it now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, wow. Oh my God, you guys in your potty mouth, They're like, hey, this is real. This is real. We've been waiting for this day for you. It's like like it's freedom for them, They felt like they were being, released, and it's like, hey, right. It's my day, not yours, buddy. But yeah, it was an awesome feeling.
Did you sleep at all on the last night in prison?
No. I stayed up with a couple girls in my room, We talked almost all night. And they were like, oh my God, finally it's happening. You're going home. It's a blessing. And, I'm still like, wow, it's really, really happening. I gave all my stuff away. I'm like, yeah, I gave it away. It is happening. You still like in disbelief. Is it really happening?
Right.
Yeah, it was. They came and got me that morning. And I knew I was going. So when I got to the front gate, the wardens were all waiting for me up there with some of the staff to say bye to me.
And then did you get picked up right there at the prison, or did you have to take a bus or something?
No, my brothers came and picked me up. And they know my favorite food was pizza. So they took me to Caesar's.
What was that like?
Oh, it felt so good to be able to hug them and kiss them. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was so happy I lost my freaking glasses. When I went to go eat pizza, I left my glasses behind.
Couldn't see anything?
Just couldn't see. I mean, they're for reading, but.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
What's the transition been like back to life on the outside?
Not good at all.
No?
No, it has not. For me, being a woman, it's been hard because I haven't gotten like the support that you think you would receive. Like if I were to be a man, I probably would have gotten all the support I needed. But since my release, I went home to my son. After a year, I left my son hoping I couldn't do it on my own. I failed. I couldn't do it on my own, so I ended up being homeless. So I was sleeping in my car a couple times with my brother. And when I, was able to, me and him would stay in a hotel room. So, I didn't want to go back to my son. I didn't want my son knowing that, I was going through the hardship. I left his crib, which I could have stayed there, but I wanted him to have his privacy back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been hard on me, and then I ended up having my brother help me. Once we got an apartment, we got ourselves situated. My brother passed away last year.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
So it left me in limbo.
Ugh. Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. So, are there like specific things that are really challenging for you? Like, is it hard to, go shopping? Is it hard to like the day-to-day stuff, or is that stuff come easier?
I don't make enough to pay like my bills.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm like, I want to say $1,400 behind in my rent.
Gosh.
So, my electric bill and my gas bill kind of killed me this year.
Mm-hmm.
My bills were coming $300, $400 a month. And I'm like, holy cow. So I was actually working to pay to keep light and gas on,
Mm-hmm.
So.
And what are you doing for work?
Finally, after 2 years of trying to get a job, my boyfriend got me a job with him. And I work at a barbershop as a receptionist.
Time behind bars has a severe impact on relationships, mostly for the worse. As the years drag on, the innocent tend to lose people close to them. Whether it's a spouse, significant other, family member, or friends, the losses pile up for a variety of reasons. Some don't believe them, some die, and others simply drift away. It's hard to imagine how lonely and difficult that is unless you've been through it. Even when you get out, things don't always get fixed. For those of us on the front lines of innocence work, we can often be the only friend an exoneree will have. The mental anguish suffered by our clients sometimes shocks the conscience.
I had a good relationship with this guy I was with, and we stayed together till 1994. And then finally it was like, I felt bad that I was holding somebody behind,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know when I was going to go home or if, in fact, I was going to go home.
Mm-hmm.
The legal system kept failing me, kept denying me and shutting doors on me. So I didn't know what to expect. And I had to just let go, of a lot of relationship, a lot of friendship and stuff like that.
Who stuck with you through everything the entire time you were in?
My immediate family and a handful of friends, just a handful.
And who were the ones that abandoned you while you were in?
Close friends of mine's, people that I trusted, people I believed in.
Was that hard, or did you see that coming, or what was that like?
I mean, after a while, you see it coming. You see them start, living their lives, and you got to accept it. They're moving on, they're having children,
Right.
and you just got to accept it for what it is.
What about the relationships with your kids?
The relationship with my kids became difficult. Every time they would come visit me and they would leave, especially my baby son, he would get sick. He would get sick for like 3 days after coming to visit me. So they would come visit me at least like 3 or 4 times out of the week. I had different family members that would bring them to me, with my mom or my uncles.
Was it a long journey for them?
Yes, it has been a long journey since they were toddlers, 4 and 6. My mom had to take them to get medicated for anxiety. So they've been, my baby still takes the anxiety pill. My oldest refused to. He's like, the hell with that. I'm grown now. I could try to handle it on his own, So now he's just deal with medical marijuana to control his anxiety. But my small son, he's still going through issues to where he's been through medical, he's been to the mental institution. He's gotten locked up because he goes through these spurs where he loses his mind and he forgets who he is. He forgets whose people are in the house, and he starts breaking things, and it's been a constant struggle.
Marilyn's release was a happy moment for all of us who were working at the California Innocence Project. Everyone knew who she was because founder Justin Brooks talked about her all the time. Her case inspired him to start an Innocence Project. We knew her case. We knew she suffered. For many of us, that Innocence Project was our first legal job. Marilyn's journey to justice was part of our story. Although we knew she was innocent, many of us doubted we'd ever get her out. For both Justin and Marilyn, they shared parts of their lives together. Each made a permanent mark on the other. In a way, they grew up together. Although they are very different people, their end goals towards justice were the same. Seeing her make it to freedom has been one of the highlights of my career. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Produced and written by Lawrence Coletti. Audio engineering by Adam Lockwood. Special contribution of music and sound elements by real-life exoneree William Michael Dillon. You can find his catalog of work at frameddillon.com. That's framed, DILLON.com. Thank you to Clio for their support. I'm your host, Michael Samanchik, and you've been listening to For the Innocent, here on Legal Talk Network.